I I often used to say very a lot on this channel that one day we would actually have a front page Daily Mail, maybe even Telegraph, basically saying, we are sorry. We got it wrong. Brexit has been a catastrophe. We are sorry. Maybe we should rethink this again. And we've come close. We have come close to that sometimes, but it's never been that, so we say, that step along the door. They've, peeped through it just briefly and then closed it very quickly and run away. But now we've got something very interesting because there is a columnist by the name of Sherelle Jacobs. I hope I've got it right. But even worse, this was written on the 1st of April. So, it's not an April Fool's joke, but we have someone here who is apologizing for Brexit, but as you will see, doesn't completely apologize for Brexit, you know, as we will see, and instead says, oh, we're just missing out on those, seizing those opportunities. How many times do you have to have a government which, even now, still massively gung-ho for Brexit, even going back to the days of Boris Johnson and co, etc., and not going and seizing those Brexit opportunities? We've covered this, I don't know how many times on this channel, but this is sort of the get out clause. Oh, yeah, Brexit's failed, but it's only because we didn't seize those opportunities, or we weren't brave enough to seize those opportunities. So, let's get on into this. But before we do get into this apologia, or close to apologia, as I think we'll at least as close as we have come yet to this. Trust me, she's going to sort of do everything she can to sort of shift the blame, of course, onto other people, but we'll get into that in a moment. But before we do get into that, please do remember to click on the like, the share button. Down below there are the doobly-doo, the comments, the comment box. Leave a comment, leave a like, leave a share. Click subscribe if you are new. You can help support the channel with the Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link, where you can buy me coffee. There's the YouTube thank you button, and of course there is the Pony Club as well. You can join as well. So let's crack on into this. So this comes from the Telegraph with the title of "Britain is now irrationally terrified of freedom. It should just rejoin the EU." So even as a Brexiteer, I'm starting to think the time has come to just cut our losses and embrace the security of the Brussels fold. So that's the real reason, guys. We're just terrified of freedom, even though you have had pro-Brexit governments ever since, like, Theresa May. And you've had a full government at one point with, like, the full gun-ho Brexiteers in charge, except you did not follow through on those Brexit freedoms because they knew what the consequences would be. They knew that actually these consequences would actually be quite bad, and they didn't follow through with them. And that, they'd realized that they'd sort of been drinking this Kool-Aid, and oh, actually, now we're outside of the EU fold. It's not as good as they were thinking themselves. And if you've got a pro-Brexiteer saying that, then oh boy, be prepared for the insane apologia you are about to hear here. So, to call it a farce does not even come close. The Brexit saga has tipped into the realm of a national tragedy. For some reason, it is taboo for leavers, such as myself, to admit that the project has become a calamity. Yes, because your own side recognizes that and does not want to admit that it has gone bad. Because they know that They are responsible. They were the ones that were meant to come up with the ideas, the plans, and yet they've even been in charge. And when they have had the opportunity to fulfill and seize these freedoms, they haven't been able to do it. It's not been as easy, as simple, or the position they were expecting when they started. They foolishly drunk their own Kool-Aid and became free market fundamentalists on this path of, if we do this, everything is going to be, gold and rosy. And when reality hits in, as always we said it would, that when Brexit meets reality, reality would always win. Same with their obsession with free market fundamentalism. When reality kicks in, it's not Brexit's fault, someone else's. But it's their project, their ideas, their ideologies, which has led us to this national tragedy. So let's go back to it. So when it comes to the B word, British politics has now become gripped in a kind of violence of silence, with the politicians and voters alike very reluctant to even confront the fallout of the country's mangled halfway situation. But after a trip to Devon fishing town of Brixham, I am more than compelled to be blunt more than ever. On one hand, Brixham represents our country at its best. It exudes an understated dynamism and has a keen sense of national identity. In the morning, trawlermen watch their catch being auctioned at Brixham's world-leading state-of-the-art fish market. And yet they've probably lost a lot of that, of not being able to, sell some of that catch to Europe, or, land that catch in Europe, or even to be export that in Europe. I don't think these trawlermen are necessarily as happy as Brexit as you're going to make them out. Wonder how many people she spoke to in that, but we'll get back to it. So anyway, and of course, in the evening they pour into the sprat and mackerel, where the landlord has been very known to pour pints in his slippers, and even Wi-Fi is banned with the "we talk to each other, read the signs." In the restaurants, visitors now feast on the hake, the god, the cuttlefish, very prolific in the channel waters, as opposed to the mass imported cod that has, in some twist of insanity, become our national dish because of the obsession with fish and chips. But there you go. Sadly, Brinksome also captures everything that is wrong with the country. I love it. Yeah, everything is wrong just based on one town. Not every single town is like this, and it's very difficult to sort of pick out different things going on in the region, because you can pick out a place in Yorkshire, very very similar, and say it's having very different problems to Brinksome, but ultimately it is down to the Tories on this one. But anyway, where are we? So everything that's wrong with the country. Tory Brexiteers promised that leaving the EU would allow Britain to take back control of its waters and enable our fishermen to feast on a sea of opportunity. But that was never going to happen. That was yet another lie that you yourself bought into. But there you go. Instead, the fishermen of Brinksome tell me that they are now at the mercy on a daily basis to whatever side of the bed the French customers get up on, and are now drowning in red tape. That was going to happen. That was what they were warned about that would happen. Shock horror. You're to blame for that. You pasted yourself, as a Brexiteer. This was one of the things you said. You have failed. You were warned about this. People like myself were telling you what the consequences of this would be, what was going to happen to the fishing industry. But of course, no, you would rather listen to Nigel Farage and think, oh my, this brand new sea of opportunity. Well, again, didn't work out that way, did it? Shock horror. So they are in despair as DEFRA, with a zeal very reminiscent of Brussels bureaucrats, now slaps questionable quotas on fish, from cuttlefish to pollock. Yes, because you do not want to have overfishing. The idea that we would get rid of quotas was laughable. But there you go. Anyway, one skipper, Tom, who voted leave, told me, to be honest, it isn't much better because we've still got the same people in government who were there before, who still have got the EU ideology. No, you've got people in government right now who are like full on Brexiteers. This idea that, quote, Brexit hasn't been done. No, you've had full governments of Brexiteers. You've got no one to blame but those Brexiteers who are in charge. They have had, since 2016, full control. When Boris Johnson took over, even more control over what the transition was going to be like. They were the ones who themselves argued this point, with Lord Frost becoming, an incredibly pro, Brexit guy and personality. You had David Davis, pro-Brexiteer, who quit his job because he couldn't hack it. You've had all these Brexiteers in charge. Kimi Badnock, right now, in charge, pro-Brexiteer, will not get rid of these regulations that you don't like because she knows if you get rid of them, that makes trade even harder. Oh, regulations, kind of important. One of the things that we were trying to make very, very clear about this, but there you go. So, it is not just the fishing industry that is reeling from the botched Brexit. Again, it's not that Brexit has been botched, it's just that Brexit was always going to be a failure. And it's coming to pass, as you are somehow now learning. Congratulations. Anyway, in recent weeks, Britain's trade talks with Canada have gone over the cliff. And in the wine industry, it now has warned the new Brexit alcohol duty is now unworkable. And Tory efforts to try and introduce border checks for goods on animal control and plant origin are becoming a fiasco. Everything we said that would happen. Of course, you were going to have these border checks. Of course, you were going to have these things. And the whole Canada trade deal, well, no, this also goes to show you that actually we are not this incredible trade partner that, you claim that we were going to be. And the wine industry, yeah, that is now just how it's going to be. Anyway, it's hilarious now that you've got someone who is a Brexiteer and pro-Brexiteer here, actually now realizing all these things that are now going wrong, but still not being able to sort of identify that it's their project that's going wrong here. Remember what I said at the beginning? You've got these fundamentalists who are like obsessed with this view that Brexit is going to be good, amazing, perfect. But oh no, Brexit is perfect. It can work. It's just been botched. Not yet taken that final step to the realization that it's actually Brexit that is to blame for all this stuff. But anyway, there you go. Anyway, let's continue. So, as this Brexit trade chaos now worsens, the deregulatory dreams of the Tory leaves fade. Yeah, these were just dreams, because if you do deregulate on this massive scale, that is going to cause even more problems for trade. Not only that, when you deregulate, you are saying we aren't going to do certain things. The chemical industry, I would say, is a prime example, because the Tories have deregulated in the chemical industries and have now lowered worker safety regulations within the chemical industry. Did you expect them to do that? I don't think so, but that's where we are in that industry. Anyway, in January, of course, of 2023, we were once again promised a bonfire of red tape. And then, within a few months, the pledge to scrap over 4,000 EU laws had completely been watered down because they knew what it was going to be. The question is, why has Brexit spectacularly failed? This is an easy question to answer. The reason why Brexit has spectacularly failed is because new Brexiteers bought into your own fantasies that Brexit was going to be this amazing, wonderful thing. And now that it's turning out, now that you have met reality, now that you have met the enemy in its cold light of day, you've realized that all these wonderful things you can't do because then they will cause more problems, which was one of the things we were constantly arguing during the referendum. If you want to do this, you will get this problem. To which then, of course, the infamous response came, well, actually, that won't happen. You're just an expert. We don't need experts, etc., etc., etc. Cue, fanciful laughing as always, but there you go. So, of course, the conventional Remainer wisdom that it was doomed from the start. Yeah, it was. But this neglects the elephant in the room. As it turns out, Britain is just terrified of freedom. Here's the thing. We are going back to the exact problems we discussed in 2016 of if you do this, if you have that massive bonfire of EU laws and regulations, that then makes trade with Europe infinitely harder because more barriers go up, more tariffs go up. Some products that we make in the UK can then not be exported to Europe because of EU laws and regulations. Remember, the EU still our largest trading partner. That has not changed. So it is not that Britain is terrified of freedom. The reality is, in the cold light of day, when you have now gone out and seen this freedom, you now realize, oh, look, this pool is very cold, but I thought it was going to be heated. I thought it was going to be warm in the light of day. No, turns out the pool is absolutely freezing. And now that you've dipped your toe in this pool, you've realized, oh dear, that's not very bad. But there you go. Anyway, back to this. So Britain is now equally terrified of free trade. Again, not how it happens, but there you go. So Britain is apparently now terrified of free trade, lest it plunges into a libertarian dystopia awash with cancerous meat and alcoholism. Canadian negotiators have now walked away because the UK government, beholden to its country's perfectionist farming lobby, refused to allow Canadian farmers to sell hormone-treated beef here. Once again, why was this the case? Well, because if you had done that, then that very treatment, that way that they do that hormone-treated beef completely undercuts our homegrown UK farmers. Like, goodbye farming industry. They weren't wrong protesting this. And I am shocked that the UK government actually held its ground on this. I will say that now. I am very shocked that they held their ground on this. But hey, credit where credit's due, I suppose. Congratulations. But they knew what the consequences would be if they did that. This whole idea of, oh, don't worry, free trade, it will all, quote, work out, does not reflect the actual consequences of what happens once you start allowing these processes to flow through the system. There's just a complete, again, free trade. If we do it, it's all going to be good, amazing, and wonderful. Those who, of course, don't, fail, oh, well, they were doomed to fail anyway. But there you go. Anyway, back to it. So, some 10 kilograms of steroid implanted cow has as much about extra estrogen as a boiled egg. It is in the chlorinated chicken hysteria all over again. But British people do not want that in their food. Like, the British public has been very clear, even before this, that they want to see not this stuff banned. They want, good environmental standards. They want good animal welfare standards as well. And yet, if you do this, it has consequences. It's chlorinated chicken is not necessarily the best way to do it. Turns out putting hormone in your beef can have some long-term bad health consequences for your population, can have some very, very bad consequences for the cattle and farms themselves. And turns out the British people don't want that. And neither do the farmers, because they know that if they allow that, then a Canadian farmer can completely undercut the British farmer, even though he's on the other side of the Atlantic. Same for the Australian farmers of what they're doing now. So, yeah, like I say, these trade deals, the British public is going to very, very, very much awaken to the true realities of these trade deals, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. When you go to other countries that aren't in the EU, trade deals and things like this, big politics, massive part of other countries' politics. This hasn't been part of our politics for years since we're in the EU, but it's going to have to become all over again. The fact that this whole Canadian deal hasn't become a bigger issue kind of shocks me, but maybe, who knows? Maybe if this had gone through, if the British government hadn't held their ground, maybe we would have seen a bigger kickback to this than we would have seen initially. But hey, there we go. So anyway, back to this. So the new Brexit alcohol duty regime that now links rates to specific alcohol strengths now outdoes its own convoluted paternalism. This was, again, an idea cooked up by the Brexiteers. Don't blame them. It's just them following this ideology, which you've said is somehow perfect, but the entire wine industry is now saying that's an awful idea. But again, ideology, this is perfect, this is wonderful. Reality, wine industry, no, that's terrible. Anyway, most striking of all is that we are now petrified of seeing the biggest opportunity presented by Brexit and becoming an AI superpower. Parliament is growing skeptical or that Britain can now pursue a lighter regulatory approach to AI without degenerating into an American-style Wild West. Here's the thing. AI does present a ton of opportunities. There are also very bad things that can happen as well. We've seen very recently the whole Barack Obama thing that was AI generated. That's incredibly worrying. Incredibly worrying that you can have quite a somewhat accurate replication of, a big politician. That can have a lot of bad consequences. There is a lot of stuff around the regulation of AI we should be looking into. And it would not shock me to go into the next general election where we do see some AI deepfakes come out. Would not shock me. But there you go. So these Hollywood fears that AI will exterminate humanity are starting to intermingle toxicity with our Christian socialist suspicion of tax dodging big tech egos. A lot of the big tech companies and do that, and they should be done in that way. There's an idea I heard recently where if you are a big online company, what should happen is you give 10% of your shares to the government, and then the government gets that, not only taxes you, but it gets those dividends from those shares, and those dividends then go into, wherever the government would like to put them. An interesting idea. An interesting idea. How well it would work, I don't know. We'll see. But again, it's just an idea being put forward. But we'll see if something like that, I don't know, could potentially work. But hey, would be quite interesting to see, maybe. So when it comes to leading the world on AI healthcare, privacy concerns are now turning policymakers and voters very queasy about leveraging our trump card. Which the NHS possesses the world's biggest single and most detailed collection of health records. Yes. And maybe we don't want that out there. Maybe we don't want to see, just let AI run everything. because maybe that could cause huge problems. Now, I'm not opposed with looking at how can we integrate AI into healthcare and things like that. That I think would be a very, very interesting applications for having AI and things like that. It would be somewhat quite interesting to see what we can do with AI in healthcare and how this can help the NHS and the whole profession. Would be very interesting to see, but it needs to be regulated because there is a lot of data, and we are right to be very squeamish about that. So there you go. And then this is this is where I like this, because this is where it gets interesting. So at some point we need to be honest with ourselves. If, as a nation, we are unwilling to maximally benefit from Brexit by leveraging our freedoms, then we should decisively minimize our losses and re-enter the security of the EU fold. I love it, because we weren't brave enough to seize the freedoms. And this is now the narrative I think the Brexiteers are going to spin about why Brexit failed. The reality is they weren't true Brexiteers. The governments we have and the people in charge weren't Brexity enough. They weren't willing to seize the freedoms that Brexit gave them. And that's why it all failed and fell apart. And it would not see me surprised to see if that was a narrative or a faction that emerged from this soon to be upcoming Tory civil war that we got. But there you go. So then we should obviously minimize losses and just re-enter the security of the EU fold. If we are not going to improve on the EU fishing quota system, then we might as well go back in. What alternative system were we Brexiteers proposing? The alternative system the Brexiteers were just proposing was that fishermen could just go out there and just catch whatever they wanted. Well, we know what that led to. That led to massive depopulation in the fishing stocks, which is why the quotas were brought in, so that we could monitor stocks and make sure that fishing was going to be there for future generations. But there you go. Whatever. Just go crazy, guys. Just go crazy. Fish all the fish you can want. Anyway, so if we're not going to improve the EU fishing quota system, then we might as well go back into it, so that fishermen can at least smoothly export their fish across the continent. The fishermen would absolutely love that, to be honest. Complain about the rest as they want. They would love to be able to do that. If we don't actually want to strike free trade deals, then we should just rejoin the EU protectionist racket and let Brussels use its market heft to prop up our unproductive sectors. Classic. The unproductive sectors, aka the zombie economy. Again, part of the whole free market fundamentalist ideology that in reality there are many businesses out there who look successful, but in reality they are zombie companies lurching forward. That because we live in, again, the EU protectionist, or we are so protectionist, these companies just lurch on forward, and they should die, even though a company might employ maybe hundreds of thousands of people, maybe across the UK or etc. No, they should just all fail, and then new companies would rise to take their place. Of course, again, free market fundamentalist ideology does not work that way, but there you go. Very quick summation of zombie because otherwise we'd be there. We've already have enough offshoots sideways from this. This video is going to be long enough already. So back to it. Using its heft to prop up our unproductive sectors. If we are unwilling to become a world leader in AI innovation, then we should throw our lot in with the EU as it aims to become another global leader in AI regulation. Again, regulation is not a bad thing. Just giving the freedom to go away and do everything. Well, what if they do something bad. Maybe we should sort of be preventative in AI stuff, saying, well, actually, maybe you shouldn't do this, or maybe you should, be careful in these. Again, regulation is not a bad thing. Having good regulation is very good, and we should be regulating AI preemptively, um, and not be in a situation where all the bad stuff has already happened and we're now having to react to that stuff. But of course, as with all technologies, they will advance, and we've got to constantly be sort of forward thinking when it comes to AI and in regulation in general, and sort of thinking about new technologies, how this might sort of do stuff. But the current government, again, so anti-regulation, they have been even afraid to pass new regulations. But there you go. So, of course, now playing the blame game. So, if the ruling class is now out of its depth, using its tax breaks, and moonshot projects to now seduce multinationals into building the super processors needed to train large AI models on UK soil, then we had better fail in the EU's vaguely forming plan to build one giant pool data bank for machine learning firms to feast on. That wouldn't be a bad idea, actually. Just think about that. All 28 nations pooling their resources to create something pretty incredible. That is very interesting. A very interesting idea. You made rejoining the EU probably quite attractive there. But there you go. And of course, yeah, it has completely failed in that, because you look at our plan of giving these semiconductor companies like the barest amount of actual financial incentive to come here versus the exact same amount that Japan is doing to create its own government run factory to create these chips. And bear in mind, Japan are spending the exact same amount of money on this, and yet their project far better than the one that we've proposed. But there you go. Similarly, if we are not going to fight for freedom on a global stage by forging a new model for liberty in the 21st century, I don't know what that would be, but hey, there you go. Then we should at least do our bit for Western security by reclaiming our disproportionate sway over EU foreign policy, not least given its shifting stance towards Russia. That is okay. That's weird that you would say that the EU is shifting towards Russia. Um Question, maybe we'll bookmark that one for later. But anyway, we'll come back to that maybe in another video. Um So, what we categorically should not do, and going on, is that pretending that our country can afford to live with a halfway Brexit. The soft Remainer view that Keir Starmer might be able to negotiate a superior, closer deal with the EU while remaining outside the single market is deluded. But hey, it puts us in that situation which we've talked about before. Keir Starmer can come along and go, "This is Brexit. This is as best as it is ever going to be. Are you sure you still want to go on with this?" It's not a bad position to be in. Um, but at least she's recognizing that actually, once again, actually being in the EU, better idea. And again, this person, pro Brexiteer, once again, sort of realizing that Brexit has failed, but not sort of really taking the obvious step that it is their project that has failed. It is their ideas, their ideology that has led us to this. And it is the Brexiteers who have been in charge. They have no one to blame but themselves. And I love it how they're calling this, oh, it's just a halfway Brexit. No, this is like a very, very hard version of Brexit that we got. A very hard version of Brexit that we got. Um, Brexiteers can call it, oh, it's just it's a halfway Brexit. But the reality is, this is a very hard Brexit that we currently find ourselves in. And yet, they wanted to go even harder because no Brexit was ever good enough for Brexiteers, as we have seen here. If you took this stance that this person is moaning about back to, like, I don't know, 2015, you'd have people like Nigel Farage praising this idea of Brexit. But as we said, fundamentalists ever pushing for a harder and harder and harder Brexit until no Brexit is good enough. And this is what we're seeing here. But anyway, back to this. So the soft Remainer view that Keir Starmer might be able to negotiate a superior close deal with the EU whilst remaining outside the single market is deluded. Having now outwitted British negotiators into signalling an agreement almost entirely on Brussels terms, the EU has very little incentive to reopen talks. Equally, and again, who's to blame for that? Who are the people in charge of negotiating that agreement? Oh, it was the Brexiteers. The Brexiteers were in charge. Again, no one else to blame but their own ideas of, oh, we held all the cards. And as for having little incentives, I think that there is a incentive for them to sort of reopen these talks, have a look at doing sort of alignment deals and things like that. Otherwise, why does Norway does side deals with the EU all the time? Switzerland does side deals with the EU all the time. Turkey side deals with the EU all the time. So while the main talks, like the main negotiating position, might not be open, there are other opportunities that will present themselves. But there you go. So let's finish these off. So equally, the view that the symbolic or theoretical regaining of British liberty makes it all worthwhile is now based on a flawed idea of freedom. True liberty is not simply a principle of non-interference or, quote, freedom from. It is also the freedom to. The freedom of liberty to act, to build, to progress. Without the latter dimension, the Brexit freedom is all meaningless. It is this high-stakes era where we now teeter on the brink of both an AI revolution and a geopolitical dark age is dangerous. So we regulate. We actually look at good ways how we can invest in these areas, how we can sort of actually attract these companies, these new industries, how we can also develop these. Have we seen that from this government? No, not one bit, not one iota, because as we've said countless before, the big problem with the Brexiteers and people like this who we've just read from, they are obsessed with the idea, and you saw it there, that very careful part where she asked that question. She asks, the question is why Brexit has spectacularly failed. The reason why, not only that it was doomed from the start, but it was doomed because people were drinking their own Kool-Aid, not willing to admit that there is a reality of if you do something, there will be consequences for it. Or if you do this, what you're going to do when this happens. And it was the denial that there was going to be any consequences for their actions because they are free market fundamentalists, hell-bent on following this path that, seeing true freedom, this true libertarian ideology, this free market fundamentalism, that if they follow it, everything is going to be all amazing, bright and shiny. You saw this with Liz Truss when she went through with her ideas for the mini budget, still refusing to admit that she did all that stuff and then it caused almost collapsed the UK pension industry. So this is not an apology. I've seen people flashing around that this is sort of an apology, like the Telegraph's apology for Brexit. This isn't the Telegraph's apology for Brexit. No, this is what we are going to be seeing from now on, of Brexiteers like this saying, well, the reality is why Brexit failed was we didn't seize the opportunities enough. We didn't seize the freedoms enough. We weren't brave enough for those freedoms. No, the real question is, why did Brexit fail? When it met the reality, when it was outside, when it was out in the cold light of day of the freedom that it wanted to seize, it very quickly realized, oh, it's a bit nippy and I forgot my coat inside the EU and I can't go back and get it. So that's where we are. That's what has happened. It would not surprise me if we started to see more and more sort of the Brexiteers trying to spin this narrative. They've been trying quite very, 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 very hard to spell out this narrative that this is what is going on. This is why, oh, Brexit has failed. It's not proper Brexit. It's not true Brexit. The people who were in charge weren't brave enough. They weren't true Brexiteers. And I can guarantee you, the next Conservative leadership contest, that's going to be an argument that gets deployed. You weren't a true Brexiteer. Because I'll tell you now, that's going to be deployed against Kimmy Badenoch if she's still around and someone wants to challenge her for leadership. Just go back and say to her, you were not a true Brexiteer. I can almost predict that and putting in my call now. I'm putting in my call now to future me. Oh, but anyway, we'll pick up that call probably later. But anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching, as always. Do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to the Patreon page and etc. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.